at the Hazbin Hotel, Chapter 32. Now that we know what's happened to Hart from Dr. Talon's experiment, how will Alistair react towards her now that he knows? And looks like things aren't going in the scientist's favor. Chapter 32. Mental Darkness Overcomes. Third person point of view. Lizzie ran up to Alistair's hotel room and stood by the door. Her ears flicked at the noise behind her. She looked over her shoulder and saw Nifty there as well. "You followed me?" Lizzie asked, putting one of her ears to the side. "Yes, I didn't want to have you go alone," Nifty answered her. Lizzie nodded with a smile and then opened the door to the room slowly. She stepped in to see the shadows that were around the bed turn and look at them. They all slanted their eyes at the two at first, but they remembered who Lizzie and Nifty were when they backed down. "At least he has shadows watching over her," Nifty said as she walked up to the bed. "Good. He learned his lesson from last time," Lizzie huffed. Nifty turned to her. "He didn't have shadows watching her because she asked him to. Not all of this is his fault," she snapped. Lizzie rolled her eyes. "Whatever. I don't care. I still blame him," she said, her ears back and baring her teeth. Nifty just sighed and said nothing else. She grabbed the chair from the side of the room and brought it to the side of the bed and stood on it so that she could see Hart better. When she saw her, she let out a small breath of shock. Lizzie got up next to the bed and put her ears down at the sight of her sister. Her hand was still out on top of the bed, so Lizzie reached out and grabbed it. She couldn't believe the sight of her. It broke her heart to see her sister this way. The shadow that was by Hart's right hand moved up to her left so that it could still be by her. The others had backed off from the bed and went to the walls, but still had a close eye on them. "Oh, Hart, I'm so sorry this happened to you," Lizzie spoke softly as she ran her clawed fingers across her sister's bandaged-up hand. Nifty looked down at Hart sadly. "You think she'll be okay?" she asked. Lizzie sat on the edge of the bed. "I don't know. Her physical wounds may heal, but I'm sure her mental wounds will be a lot harder, I'm sure." Lizzie growled. "I can only imagine what those bastards did to her in there." Lizzie gripped the sheet under her. Nifty patted Lizzie's arm. "I was thinking the same. We have to help her through all this too." "That's what is going to be hard," Lizzie sighed. "I just hope my sister will be the same after this. That's what I'm the most worried about." "She'll be fine. It will just take some time. We'll have Hart back before you know it," Nifty reassured her. Lizzie looked down at her sister's hand that was in hers. The wolf girl still had her ears back. "Lucifer. Do I hope so? I don't know what I'll do without her." Lizzie noticed Hart's ears were flicking, like she was listening to something. She started to twitch on the bed, and her face started to scrunch up. Her ears pinned against her head. She was saying something, but it was mumbled. The shadow that is by Hart's arm looked worried and went up to her head. It made a meowing noise. "She's having a nightmare," Nifty quickly said. Lizzie soon got panicked. "What should we do?" "I don't know," Nifty said frantically. Hart started to move more on the bed. Her mumbles became more audible. She kept saying no over and over. The shadows that were in the room didn't know what to do at first. They all went down and onto the bed and looked like they wanted to help hold her down. The one by her head went down to her left hand and lay on top of it. "We have to wake her up," Lizzie growled. She didn't want to, but she didn't want her sister to be like this. "Be careful," Nifty said. Lizzie walked towards Hart's shoulder and shook her a moment. "Hart, wake up!" Lizzie shook her again. "You're having a nightmare. Wake up!" Hart started to thrash more and started to fight back against Lizzie. She was losing her grip on her. Lizzie growled. "Hart!" she said louder. "Stop!" She tried to hold her down and put some weight on her. Hart's eyes then snapped open. When she did, though, she let out a loud scream. It was so piercing that Lizzie took her hands off Hart's shoulders and held her ears. That is the loudest she has ever screamed. It was out of fear. You could tell that she was thinking her nightmare was happening. Tears started to fall from her face. Her eyes were open, but she still fought against a force. Then she squeezed her eyes shut again. Hart screamed, "Alistair!" Once Dr. Talon said those words, a lot of gasps were around the room. Charlie and Vaggie just looked at each other with a confused look. Husk actually dropped the bottle of booze he had in his hand. Angel, Russ, and Coda already knew, so their shock had already sunk in. They just looked at Alistair. The one most dumbfounded by the words was the deer demon. He still held on to the scientist by the throat, but his grip slowly loosened and the wolf demon slipped from his fingers and fell to the ground. Dr. Talon tried to get his breath back as he kneeled on the ground at the deer demon's feet. Alistair stood there, trying to sink in the information that he was just given, playing the words over in his head. If this demon was right about this, he just wondered if it was true. How, though? How did he do such a feat? It was almost crazy to think. At the same time, why? Why did he want to do this? So many questions went through his head. Angel was brave enough to walk up to Alistair as the demon almost looked like he was staring off into space. "It's true, too. I know you're thinking it's probably not true, but it is. He showed us all the results on his computer." "She actually is," Angel told him. The room was just silent. Alistair had a small static hum, but that was about it. Husk had come out from behind the bar and he was standing on the other side of the couch. Charlie wanted to go up to Alistair, but she stopped herself. She didn't know what he would do. "Sorry, Al," Angel whispered and went back next to Russ and hugged him, the snake demon gently accepting the embrace. Alistair's head just went down as he looked at the ground at his feet. He had no words. His mind was just in a fog. He was just blank, with his eyes just wide. This demon had been successful in something that Hart told him that she wanted. Something they talked about just a few days ago. To think it was something that they now could have. It was just crazy talk if mentioned. Then his mind turned dark. There was only one problem. It was not his. It was of his enemy, someone he despised. The man who did this to Hart in the first place took advantage of her, used her like a toy. That spiked his anger at his thoughts. The humming he was giving off got louder. Charlie then took a chance. She walked up next to Alistair. "Al, I know this is a lot of information to take in," she said softly to him, "especially for something as crazy as this. But I want to let you know that we're here to help you, though. Help both of you through this, no matter what." Charlie wanted to reassure him. Alistair said nothing. His anger just spiked more. The humming turned into a louder, static sound, like when you first turn on the TV and it's on the wrong channel. He couldn't go through with this, not when the child wasn't even his. This is not how he pictured his life would turn out. He would not play a father figure to a kid that wasn't even his own, but it was to his own enemy nonetheless. He wouldn't be able to control himself over it. He had to try to convince Hart to get rid of it, if it was even possible. Knowing her and how she was, that would be a challenge. So what if this scientist made it possible and it was all for testing? Alistair didn't care. It would break his heart and take him back these last few days. The days he failed her. His thoughts did not last long. He was going to say something about it all, But then an ear-deafening scream was then heard through the lobby. Everyone held their ears from it. Alistair Static was cut off dead as his head snapped up, and he looked up at the stairwell. Was that Hart screaming? What the fuck was that? Angel exclaimed as he put his hands down. Alistair soon was correct as he heard his name being screamed now. Alistair! All the thoughts the dear demon had soon left him. His anger was gone. His heart was now fast-paced just from the sound of the scream. Fear rushed through him now as he turned quickly and ran up the stairs. It was no doubt Hart, and he wasn't about to let anything else happen to her. He ran down the hallway and turned a barge into his hotel room. He was shocked to see both Lizzie and his shadows trying to hold Hart down as she fought against them, and she was breathing hard and gasping. Nifty was still on the side of the bed, watching in fear. She then looked at Alistair in the doorway. She was having a nightmare and started to thrash in her sleep. We didn't want her hurting herself, so we tried to stop her. Nifty explained. This was not right. If she was having a nightmare about what happened, they shouldn't hold her down. It only made it worse, because they had her tied up the entire time she was with them. Alistair walked up quickly to the bed. Get off her, he demanded. You're making things worse holding her down. She thinks she's tied up again. The shadows obeyed him and let go of her. Lizzie looked at him a moment, a fire burning in her eyes. But she did as told and took herself away from Hart's shoulders. Alistair went to the side of the bed now. He honestly didn't know what to do to calm her. Just seeing her like this just made him afraid slightly. Alistair put a hand to her cheek that was covered in tears, and then took his other one and went to her ear to caress it. Hart, he said calmly as he could. The girl's motions were soon slowed down as he went to her ear, petting her head and then back to her ear. Hart, open your eyes. It's me, Alistair said softly. The demon girl under him started to breathe slowly, and her thrashing stopped. My little wolf, you are safe. Look at me. Hart's breathing had slowed, but she was still gasping from it all. She slowly started to open her eyes. She was afraid of what she would see, but the voice she knew had to be Alistair. Now fully opened, her eyes met with Alistair's crimson ones, who were looking down at her with so much worry. She felt him caressing her ear as his other laid on her cheek. She was enjoying the gentle touch he gave. He had calmed her. Alistair let a small smile go across her face. There you are. He leaned down to place a kiss on her forehead. You're okay, my love. You're okay, he whispered to her. Alistair, Hart whispered back and wrapped her arms around his shoulders, her ears going back down. Don't leave me, please. 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 She kept whispering and begging. Alistair placed his forehead to hers. Shh, calm down. I won't go anywhere. I promise. Hart pulled Alistair down and onto her slightly as she cried on his shoulder. She didn't care how much pain she was in from her wounds. She just wanted to hold him close, not let him go. Charlie and the others had all ran after Alistair and just stood in the doorway of the room to watch what was happening. Charlie frowned at the sight. Hart really needed him right now to wake her from that. It was almost scary. She reached down and grabbed Vaggie's hand tightly. Dr. Talon surprisingly didn't run away after everything. He had no reason to really run, and Angel still had an eye on him anyway. He followed the group up to the room to see the scene unfold. The poor girl. He felt bad enough doing what he did to her. Now to actually stop and look at all that had happened to her from the two overlords. All her wounds. It almost sickened him. He understood now why the deer demon reacted the way he did when he told him the news. Whether it was Alistair's or not, he wanted to keep track of everything for his research, so he had to stick around. With all this, though, it would stress her out. He didn't know how her body would take it or react. Alistair pulled away from Hart a moment. Are you okay now, my love? He asked her. Hart let out a sniffle, but nodded, her ears going back up slowly. I think so. I was just having a really bad dream. Alistair lost his large smile a moment. I know. I figured as much. Don't worry, dear. You're safe here with me. No one will hurt you. Alistair tried to wipe away her tears. She took a breath in and then let it out. She then looked to the side of Alistair and saw Lizzie, who had a look of worry on her face. Oh, sister, I'm sorry. Alistair pulled away a moment so that Hart could see Lizzie better. Lizzie smiled with her ears to the side. It's okay, sis. I tried to calm you, but I guess I wasn't the best at it. She gave a small chuckle. Hart chuckled for a moment from that. It's okay. Don't take it hard on yourself, Hart told her. Lizzie reached out and grabbed Hart's hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. I'm just glad you're home, Hart. Lizzie smiled wider. Hart gave a smile in return. I'm happy to be home. I'm just sorry you had to see me like this. Lizzie frowned. I know, but not much we can do about that. Of course, Alistair made you look like a mummy. Lizzie chuckled. Alistair let out a buzzing noise, but let it die when Hart started laughing. He does his best. I'm glad he took care of me either way, Hart said. Then a voice behind the group came forward. I can help with the wounds if you want. Hart froze. She knew that voice. She could hear it in the dark. No, he couldn't be. If he was, why? The small group parted, and Dr. Talon stepped forward. I do know things about medicine as well, so I can help, he added. Hart just looked at the scientist. Her mind went back to those dark times when he would poke and prod at her, those days when the two overlords were done with her, doing all his tests. She felt her breath quicken and her chest tighten. Memories flashed in her head. She felt the pain of the needles in her skin. No. Hart reached up and grabbed Alistair's shirt, and she pulled him down as she sat herself up in bed. It hurt to do so, but her panic distracted her from the pain. No, Alistair, keep him away from me, Hart screamed. Alistair was surprised by the sudden action of her pulling him, but he did wrap his arms around her. He sat down on the edge of the bed, and he brought her close to his chest. She buried her face into him and started to cry again. She even wrapped her wings around them. Alistair put a hand to her head and started to pet her. He looked down at her and then up at Dr. Talon. Alistair squinted his eyes in anger. Maybe you should leave, Alistair growled. Don't you think we should tell her, Alistair? Charlie asked, stepping forward from the group. I don't think she knows. Hart put her wing down slightly, peeking at the corner of her eye to look at the scientist. Her panic was still there as she tried to control her rapid breath. What were they talking about? Was it what the scientist was testing her for? Did he tell them something about it all? She was now curious. She started to take shaking breaths to control her panic and tried to push her images back. She felt Alistair hold on her tightly a moment. Lizzie looked to the scientist, the wolf demon, and growled. Tell her what? Who is this guy anyway? Lizzie took a step towards the red wolf. Lizzie beat Hart to the question of wondering what was needed to be told to her. The scientist put his ears back and his hands up. Please, I mean no harm. I will not do anything to her. My name is Dr. Talon, he introduced himself. Hart picked her head up from Alistair's chest, putting her wings back behind her. She was still wary and scared of the scientist, but her curiosity was greater right now. In Alistair's arms, she knew he couldn't get to her. She looked up at him with worry. What did you do to me anyway? When you did all those tests to me and stuff? Injected me with that serum every day? I want to know. No more secrets, Hart said sternly with a small growl. She felt Alistair's claws put pressure against her skin. He must know. He told them already, and it seemed Alistair was not happy as he turned his head away from everyone. Hart's hand still lay on Alistair's chest. She felt his heart quicken and beat fast against his ribcage. She was worried about how he was reacting. Dr. Talon sighed and walked closer to them. Hart, I want to apologize to you first. If I would have known you belonged to the radio demon, I wouldn't have done my experimenting on you. I honestly tell you the truth. He took a pause. Second, I apologize for all the poking and prodding I did. I assure you, I meant no harm. What was your experiment? Lizzie asked. Dr. Talon took a breath. I worked on it for the last few years. I did a lot of tweaking, and after so long, Hart is the first one to be positive in my experiment. I wanted sinners to be able to experience something they couldn't have down here. I called it PDS. It stands for... He took another pause and looked at Hart. Pregnant Damned Souls. Hart's eyes went wide. Lizzie's hands turned to fists. What? They both exclaimed, their ears up. Wait. Lizzie waved her arms around. Are you trying to tell me that my sister is... Lizzie couldn't even finish her sentence. Pregnant? Yes, she is. Dr. Talon finished with a nod of his head. Hart was silent, her ears turned backwards. What? So that was the serum he was putting into her? It was a way of making her pregnant because of this experiment? If that was the case, he was testing her to see if she truly was. Is that why she was feeling so weird? Why her stomach hurt? Because it was going through changes it wasn't used to? Forced to carry something her demon body wasn't supposed to? Her mind wandered. She felt happy. Something she always wanted was finally possible to her. It was in her grasp. Hart was snapped out of her thoughts when she heard the static around Alistair rise. It was strong and it tingled her skin where he was touching her. Then it was when she realized he was upset about this news. Why? Then it smacked her in the face almost. If he said she was pregnant now, then the child wasn't Alistair's. No wonder he was upset. Hart was lost in thought. She didn't come to a conclusion, though. Even though it wasn't Alistair's, she would keep it, if her body would let her. It was still a life, a gift. She understood why Alistair wouldn't be happy over it, since the child is technically Valentino's, one of his biggest enemies. If he was going to make a big deal over it, she'd fight him if she had to. She wouldn't let a life end from someone else's decision. So, what does that mean for me now? Hart asked. Dr. Talon was surprised by her response. Well, if you'll allow me, I want to stick around and monitor you while you go through this process, he explained. This is the first, and I want to see how your body reacts and changes, anything of that nature, to all this. I wanted to document everything I can. I'd be happy to, Hart answered with a smile. Everyone looked at her in shock, their mouths agape. Charlie was surprised still. After everything the two overlords put her through, she still wanted to go through with it all. Charlie wondered why. Was it because it was something she wanted? Even so, why go through with it when it wasn't even Alistair's kid? It made no sense to keep it around. Knowing Hart, though, her kind soul didn't want to give up a life so easily. Lizzie turned around to face her sister with a scowl. Are you serious? She growled. Lizzie was furious, not because of this doctor, whatever he was, but because Alistair had let this happen. Then her sister wanted to keep a reminder of what happened to her with this child. Lizzie blamed Alistair deep down. Nothing would change her mind about that. But I am, Hart answered her as she looked at her sister with a soft gaze. Alistair's static grew louder at this. He was angry. You can't, he whispered. Hart looked up at Alistair with a stern look. I will. Alistair, this is my body. You can't tell me what to do with it. She told him with slight anger. Why would you want to keep this vile thing? Alistair asked with a hiss of static. It's a life, Alistair. Life has to be given a chance. No matter where or who it's from, Hart explained to him. Alistair's conclusion was right. She wanted to keep it. Damn her kind soul. The situation had sickened him. He didn't feel like being in this room anymore, being by her at the moment now. The deer demon undid his arms from around her and stormed off. The group separated as he passed, feeling the power radiating off of him. Alistair, Hart called after him, can we talk about this? But he did not turn around or stop. Alistair just kept walking. Hart's ears went down in sadness as she watched him walk out. She understood why he was mad, but she didn't want him to just walk out like that. Her heart broke a moment from the scene. Hopefully he would clear his mind and return. There were still shadows in the room, so he didn't call them off. She noticed the small one still on the bed with her. Usually it cuddled up with her. The small ones liked her, but when she reached out for it, it backed away and disappeared into the blanket. She was saddened even more. Now his shadows were rejecting her. I feel this will not end well for us, Hart thought. Everyone watched Alistair walk out as well. They turned back to her with a sad expression. Angel watched Alistair walk down the hall. He dug his claws into the wall as he walked. Poor guy. He had so many emotions going on he didn't know what to do. With Hart, though, Angel thought she was crazy for wanting to keep the thing. It would just mean that Val had won. Alistair wouldn't accept it. It would be very hard for them. Part of Angel wishes that her body rejected this process. Otherwise, they might crash and burn. This was the last thing he wanted to see. Hart was not expecting that from Alistair. Lizzie went up to her sister and sat down where Alistair was and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. She saw the heartbreak in her sister's eyes, so she went to comfort her. She put a clawed hand on Hart's head. We'll talk to him later, okay? Lizzie whispered to her. Hart just nodded as she felt tears start to form again. She leaned into her sister for comfort. Charlie walked up to Hart and Lizzie. Vaggie walked close behind them. Are you going to be okay? Charlie asked as she sat on the edge of the bed, and Vaggie stood at the foot of the bed. Hart looked at Charlie. He just needs time to clear his head. It'll be okay. She smiled softly. Charlie gave her a look that said she didn't believe her, but let it pass. Charlie looked back at everyone in the doorway. Can you guys leave us for a little while? I think we need a little girl time. The guys all looked at each other, but understood. They all nodded. No problem, babe, Angel answered. Come on, boys. Let's leave the ladies be. He started to push them towards the door. Dr. Talon had his ears down, but started to walk towards the door. He didn't want to intrude on anything that they would talk about. He would just have to talk to Hart another time about everything. Dr. Talon? Charlie called behind him. The wolf demon turned around to face her. Yes, princess. If you wish, you can stay in the hotel for as long as you need to. I don't want you going back to Valentino, Charlie told him. I promise not to tell my father what you're doing, and I'll try my best to help you. Dr. Talon looked at the demon princess with surprise, his ears up. He was not expecting that at all. To have her be this kind to him was unexpected. He gave a smile and a small bow as his tail wagged behind him. Thank you, princess. I appreciate this very much. Please, call me Charlie, she laughed. No need for thanking. I know you need to keep an eye on things for your research, so why not be close by? I know you're not a bad demon, Dr. Talon. You just hung out with the wrong individuals. Dr. Talon was honestly honored for her kindness. Thank you, Charlie, he corrected himself quickly. I'll do all I can. Charlie looked hard a moment. Will you be okay with him around if he stays? Charlie made sure. Hart nodded. Yes. I want to keep helping him, and I know he'll help me as well. I'm in this now, and I don't plan to back out. Dr. Talon gave a small bow at that. Thank you, milady. He gave another small bow. I'll let you girls be. The wolf demon walked out of the room and closed the door for them. Charlie turned to Hart and put on a smile as well, and tried to comfort her friend. Hart, I think it would be good if you stayed in the hotel for a few days to rest up. We want your wounds to heal so you can get back up on your feet, Charlie suggested to her. Thanks, Charlie. I think that would be a good idea as well. Plus, I have all you guys to help me, Hart agreed, looking at them all. She looked away from them, though. Although, I should probably go back to my own room. I have a feeling Alistair isn't going to want to be around me for a while, she said, her face into Lizzie's side. They frowned at her. Hart, what makes you think that? Nifty asked. It's pretty obvious, Hart stated, talking into Lizzie's side again. He's angry with me. Probably wants nothing to do with me now. Lizzie rubbed her hand along Hart's arm gently. It's a lot to take in. Just give him some time. I'm sure he'll come around. Don't draw conclusions too early. Hart shook her head. She honestly didn't see it happening. Not only were her marks on her body not from Alistair. Her body was no longer just his. Now to add on top of this, baby wasn't even from him either. She stayed quiet, though. Hart, we're all here to help you, Vaggie told her. The moth girl reached and grabbed Charlie's hand. Charlie smiled at Vaggie and then back to Hart. She's right. We'll be here for you, so don't be afraid, okay? Hart peeked up at them. I'm here too, sis, Lizzie said to soothe her. Stay in Alistair's room for now. If something happens, just let us know and we'll help you to your room, Charlie said. Thanks, you guys, Hart responded with a small smile. Just because we don't like your decision doesn't mean we won't leave you hanging, Nifty added. That probably wasn't the best words to tell her right now, but she wasn't wrong. Every one of them didn't like the idea of Hart keeping this. Even so, they would support their friend with her decision and help her out. Even so, they didn't know how Alistair would be with all this. All they knew is, if Alistair did anything to hurt her, they'd hear about it, radio demon or not. Alistair was outside behind the hotel. There was a small garden there that Hart helped Charlie and the other girls with to put together. They did it all 2 years ago. Alistair and Hart would walk out there when they were helping at the hotel. They spent small breaks out there, walked and having chats, and Alistair would compliment her to make her flustered so he could hear that laugh of hers. For him, though, this walk was not a pleasant one. He was sitting on a bench out there, grabbing his ear tufts and fisting his hands into them as they were back against his head. The static he gave off was almost deafening as he was lost in frustration. His world around him was distorted. He got up and started to walk. He had to clear his mind somehow. He looked around at some of the flowers. He went to a rose bush and reached down and grabbed the flower. He picked it, and when he did, it wilted instantly in his hand. He forgot when he was in a mood like this. Everything basically wilted at his touch. He sighed and continued walking. His mind wandered. How was he going to convince Hart to let this go? He honestly didn't know how to. He didn't want to use force. The last thing he wanted to do was hurt her. Of course, with the way his mind was working against him, it was hard. All the pregnancy stuff had thrown him out of whack. He hated the thought of her carrying the child of one of his enemies. To think they had a chance to have that happen, and it was ripped away from him. He had to convince her to get rid of it. He didn't want to end up arguing about it. He couldn't help how he felt about it all, though. His darkness was rising in him again, just taking him over. He had an image of his hands around her throat. Never did he want to think of such things. Thoughts of wanting to hurt her made him sick. He would never do that to her. He still loved her. Of course, it was what happened to her that made his darkness come back. She wasn't marked by him. New ones had taken over his old ones. Her scent had even changed, almost different entirely. She had been taken by someone else, and that thought of her not being his angered him to no end. It was an instinct thing that took over him. Part of him hated that animal part of himself. He never had to worry about it before. Now that he was experiencing it, he absolutely hated it to no end. It was not like he could make up for it right now, to mark hers again. Heart was in no condition to do such things. Who knows when she would be able to? She needed time to heal mentally and physically. He needed to hold back his urges. Who knows when they'll get married now, either. That will probably be on hold right now. Of course, after all this stuff happens, who knows if she'll even want to marry him now. Alistair stopped when he walked past a small tree that was in the garden. He never noticed before, but there was something carved into the tree trunk. He took one of his claws and traced the marks with it. He knew it was Heart that did it. He knew her handwriting. There was a heart carved into the tree with an H and an A carved inside it. It was something cheesy that teenagers would do, but it made him smile, nonetheless. He gave a small chuckle, but it died down as his smile disappeared. His claws dug into the tree a moment as he clenched his teeth together. "Damn it," he whispered between his teeth. Alistair started to fall, his claws digging into the tree. He let out a yell as he fell to the ground on his knees. He started to punch the ground in frustration. He did it over and over until his hand was bleeding. The pain almost brought him comfort. His black blood now stained the ground from the hole he had formed. He brought his now aching and bleeding hand to his chest and just kneeled there on the ground. He started to cry again. This time out of frustration. He hated crying. He felt angry that things turned out this way. End of chapter 32. Oh boy. Now more drama will be coming in, and I will admit, I'm having a hard time because of all the emotions and all this craziness. But for now, I will leave you guys there. Until next time, guys, I will see you later.